EA launched Titanfall 2 between Call of Duty and Battlefield 1, basically sending their masterpiece to die. That's one of 15 incredible games destroyed by terrible timing or broken launches. Keep watching because you're about to discover forgotten masterpieces. Let's start with one of the biggest tragedies in gaming history, Titanfall 2. This game had everything going for it. The single-player campaign was a masterclass in level design, especially that mind-bending effect and cause level where you're jumping between past and present to solve puzzles. The bond between pilot Jack Cooper and his Titan BT-7274 was more emotionally engaging than most Hollywood blockbusters. Then there's the multiplayer, wall running, double jumping, and calling down giant mechs in the middle of firefights. The movement system was so fluid it made other shooters feel like you're running through molasses. But here's the kicker. EA decided to launch it right between Call of Duty Infinite Warfare and Battlefield 1 in October 2016. It's like opening the world's best gourmet restaurant between McDonald's and Burger King. The game got absolutely crushed, despite being better than both its competitors. Now let's talk about Prey. And no, not the 2006 one. That naming confusion didn't help either. Arcane Studios created what might be the best immersive sim ever made, set on the space station Talos Avosh. This game asks a simple question: what if that coffee mug on your desk could suddenly sprout legs and try to kill you? The mimics are pure nightmare fuel. These alien creatures can disguise themselves as literally any object in the environment. That chair you're about to sit in? Potential death trap. Those boxes stacked in the corner? Could be 3 mimics having a meeting. This constant paranoia keeps you on edge in ways that jump scares never could. But what makes Prey incredible is how it gives you solutions to every problem. Need to get through a locked door? You could hack the keypad, find another route through the vents, transform into a coffee cup and roll under the gap, or just blow a hole in the wall with explosives. The game never forces you into one playstyle. The Neuromod system lets you upgrade with both human and alien abilities. Want to become a master hacker? Go for it. Prefer telekinetic powers? Absolutely. Want to literally transform into objects to sneak around? The game's got you covered. Every playthrough feels completely different based on how you choose to approach problems. The problem was that immersive sim doesn't exactly scream mainstream appeal, and the name confusion with the original Prey meant a lot of people didn't know what they were getting into.
Diagnosing superficial injuries. Nothing a portable medical team can handle.
Dishonored 2 should have been a slam dunk. The original was beloved. Arcane had years to perfect the formula, and they delivered some of the most creative level design in gaming history. The Clockwork Mansion alone, where you're manipulating rooms and walls like a mechanical puzzle box, is pure genius. Then there's the time-shifting mansion where you're jumping between a glamorous party in the past and a decrepit ruin in the present. You can play as either Emily or Corvo, and they're not just cosmetic differences. Emily's powers like Domino, which links enemies so damage to one affects them all, completely changes how you approach encounters. Corvo brings back his classic abilities, but refined to perfection. The level of creativity the game allows is staggering, whether you're possessing enemies, stopping time, or finding completely non-violent solutions to every encounter. Now, will it mind the store? And damn, the art direction deserves special mention. Mbaka feels like a living, breathing Mediterranean city with its own culture, architecture, and problems. Every district tells a story through environmental details, and the way dust motes dance in sunbeams creates an atmosphere that's both beautiful and unsettling. But here's where everything went wrong. The PC version launched with serious performance issues. Frame rate problems, stuttering, and crashes killed the word-of-mouth momentum. By the time Arcane fixed these problems, most players had moved on. It's heartbreaking, because underneath those technical issues was one of the most polished and creative stealth games ever made. The console versions ran fine, but the damage was done. This masterpiece got buried under launch day technical problems that overshadowed years of brilliant game design. Mirror's Edge was way too ahead of its time. Released in 2008, this first-person parkour game asked players to think about movement in ways they'd never experienced before. Faith Connors wasn't just running through levels, she was flowing through them, using momentum and physics to chain together wall runs, precision jumps, and death-defying leaps across rooftops. The clean, minimalist aesthetic was revolutionary. While other games were drowning in brown and gray color palettes, Mirror's Edge gave us pristine white buildings accented with bold reds, blues, and yellows. The visual design wasn't just pretty, it was functional. Those red objects weren't just decoration, they were your path forward. A visual language that guided you through the urban jungle without breaking immersion with traditional UI elements. But here's what makes Mirror's Edge even more impressive in hindsight. The story of corporate surveillance and authoritarian control feels incredibly relevant today. Faith's world of government monitoring, restricted information, and runners carrying messages off the grid reads like a prophecy of our current digital landscape. The game was asking questions about privacy and freedom that most people weren't ready to hear in 2008. The problem was that first-person platforming was completely alien to most players. People expected to shoot things, not calculate jump distances and momentum. The learning curve was steep, and when you missed a jump and fell to your death, frustration set in quickly. EA's marketing didn't help either. They couldn't figure out how to sell a game that defied every genre convention. But Mirror's Edge influenced everything that came after. You can see its DNA in games like Dying Light, Titanfall, and countless indie platformers. It proved that first-person games could be about more than just pointing and shooting. This was pure innovation that deserved way more recognition than it got.
We hadn't talked much since I joined up. He had a break-in last week. He's still a campaign.
Sunset Overdrive is what happens when Insomniac Games decides to throw every crazy idea at the wall, then somehow makes it all stick together perfectly. Picture this: Tony Hawk's Pro Skater meets third-person shooting in a world where an energy drink has turned most of humanity into mutant monsters. You're grinding on power lines, bouncing off cars, and wall running while firing weapons that shoot vinyl records and teddy bear bombs.
Fine.
The traversal system is absolutely incredible. Staying on the ground gets you killed, so you're constantly chaining together grinds, bounces, and wall runs to maintain momentum while fighting enemies. It's like playing a rhythm game where the beat is gunfire and explosions. Once you master the movement, you feel like Spider-Man having the best day of his life. The humor is perfectly self-aware without being obnoxious. Your character constantly breaks the fourth wall, commenting on video game tropes and making jokes about the absurdity of the situation. The weapons are gloriously ridiculous. You've got the acid sprinkler that melts enemies, the high fidelity that fires vinyl records, and the freeze ray that lets you shatter frozen enemies like ice sculptures. But Sunset Overdrive had one massive problem. It was an Xbox One exclusive during the early days when PS4 was absolutely dominating the console war. Microsoft needed exclusives desperately, but limiting this incredible game to one platform killed its potential audience. This was the kind of game that could have been huge if it had launched on multiple platforms. The character customization was fantastic, letting you create anyone from punk rockers to business executives to complete weirdos. The world of Sunset City felt alive with its bright colors and constant chaos. This wasn't just another post-apocalyptic wasteland, this was a playground designed for maximum fun. Insomniac poured their heart into this project, and you can feel their passion in every ridiculous moment. It deserved to find a massive audience. But platform exclusivity during a console war meant most gamers never got to experience this masterpiece of controlled chaos. The Evil Within represents Shinji Mikami's return to survival horror, but it launched at the worst possible time. This was 2014, when the gaming world was obsessed with action shooters and open-world adventures. Horror games felt outdated, relegated to indie developers making cheap jump scare simulators, but Mikami, the creator of Resident Evil, had something much more sophisticated in mind. This game brought back genuine resource management in ways that modern players had forgotten. Every bullet mattered, every health item was precious, and every encounter required careful planning. You couldn't just run and gun your way through, you had to think, conserve, and sometimes just run away. It was classic survival horror design in an era that had moved past those mechanics. The psychological horror elements were brilliant. Detective Sebastian Castellanos finds himself trapped in a nightmarish world where reality keeps shifting, where monsters represent twisted manifestations of trauma and guilt. The game didn't rely on cheap scares, it built a suffocating atmosphere of dread that stayed with you long after you stopped playing. But the marketing completely failed to communicate what made the game special. The trailers made it look like just another generic horror game with jump scares and gore. They couldn't figure out how to sell the psychological depth, the careful pacing, or the return to classic survival horror mechanics. Players expecting modern horror got something much more cerebral and demanding. The boss battles were grotesque masterpieces, each one a disturbing spectacle that tested your nerves as much as your skills. The Spider Lady, the Keeper with his safe head, these weren't just obstacles to overcome, but psychological nightmares that represented deeper themes about guilt, trauma, and the human condition. The Evil Within deserved to be recognized as a return to form for survival horror, but it got lost in a market that had moved on to different experiences. Darksiders II took everything great about the original and cranked it up to 11, but it launched into one of the most brutal circumstances any game has ever faced. THQ was going bankrupt during the game's development, and by the time it hit shelves, the company was in complete financial meltdown. All marketing momentum died, and players had no idea this masterpiece even existed. Playing as Death, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, you got a massive RPG experience that blended Zelda-style dungeons with God of War combat and a full loot system. Death wasn't just a different character, he played completely differently from War. Where the first game was methodical and heavy, Death was acrobatic and fast, wall running and chain swinging through environments with incredible fluidity. The world was absolutely massive, multiple realms to explore, each with their own unique aesthetic and challenges. The Forge Lands felt like a steampunk fever dream, while the Kingdom of the Dead was this haunting, ethereal realm where souls wandered in eternal twilight. Each area was packed with secrets, side quests, and optional dungeons that rivaled anything in major RPGs. But what made Darksiders II special was how it evolved the formula. The loot system meant every enemy could drop better weapons or armor, giving you constant progression beyond just story beats. The skill trees let you customize Death's abilities. You could focus on necromancy, become a melee powerhouse, or find the perfect balance between magic and combat. The dungeons were pure genius, massive multi-layered puzzles that required both combat skills and brainpower to solve. These weren't just rooms with enemies, they were mechanical marvels with shifting platforms, water puzzles, and environmental challenges that made you feel like an archaeologist and warrior combined. THQ's bankruptcy killed what should have been a massive franchise. This was easily one of the best action RPGs ever made, but business problems completely overshadowed the incredible game underneath. Alpha Protocol is the most ambitious RPG you've probably never played, and that's a tragedy because Obsidian created something genuinely revolutionary here. This spy thriller asked a simple question: what if every conversation, every choice, and every mission approach completely changed your story? Not just dialogue differences, but fundamental shifts in plot, character relationships, and available options. So, the conversation system was pure genius. Instead of traditional dialogue trees, you had a timer and 3 personality options: suave, aggressive, or professional. But here's the kicker. Characters remembered everything. Be sarcastic to someone early in the game, and they'll reference it hours later. Save someone's life, and they might return the favor when you least expect it. The reactive storytelling was deeper than anything before or since. Every mission could be approached multiple ways. Want to go in guns blazing? Absolutely. Prefer to hack security systems and sneak through vents? Perfect. Feel like bribing guards and smooth talking your way past obstacles? The game supported that too. But your choices had consequences. Kill someone quietly and their allies might never know what happened. Go loud and suddenly you're dealing with increased security and angry enemies who know you're coming. The problem was that Alpha Protocol launched in a buggy state that hid its brilliance. Combat felt clunky, animations were stiff, and technical issues made it easy to dismiss as just another broken game. But underneath those problems was the most sophisticated choice and consequence system ever created. Character relationships were incredibly complex. Scarlet Lake might hate you for your methods, but respect your results. Stephen Heck could become your best friend or your worst enemy based on how you handle his particular brand of insanity. Every handler, contact, and target reacted to your reputation and previous actions in ways that made each playthrough feel completely unique. This was too complex for action fans who wanted straightforward shooting, and too janky for RPG purists who expected polish. Alpha Protocol fell between genres and audiences, but it created something genuinely special that deserved way more recognition. Spec Ops. The line pulled off one of the greatest tricks in gaming history. It looked like every other generic military shooter, but it was actually a profound anti-war masterpiece that deconstructed everything those games represented. The marketing showed soldiers shooting bad guys in Dubai, and that's exactly what players expected. What they got instead was a psychological horror story that asked uncomfortable questions about violence, heroism, and the cost of war. This was Heart of Darkness transplanted to a sand-buried Dubai, where Captain Walker leads his squad into a city destroyed by massive sandstorms. What starts as a rescue mission becomes a descent into madness as Walker makes increasingly desperate choices to justify his actions. The game doesn't just show you war is hell, it makes you complicit in that hell through your own choices. The white phosphorus scene is gaming's most devastating moment. Without spoiling it, the game forces you to use a chemical weapon, then shows you the horrific consequences of that choice. It's not a cutscene you watch, it's something you do, something you can't take back. The game asks whether following orders absolves you of moral responsibility, and the answer is deeply uncomfortable. Here's why it flopped. These came expecting Call of Duty, power fantasy, and got existential crisis instead. The marketing couldn't reveal the game's true nature without spoiling the experience, so it looked like just another shooter in an oversaturated market. The environmental storytelling was incredible, but here's why it flopped. Players came expecting Call of Duty power fantasy and got existential crisis instead. The marketing couldn't reveal the game's true nature without spoiling the experience, so it looked like just another shooter in an oversaturated market. If you want to experience this psychological masterpiece yourself, check the description for links. It's dirt cheap now and absolutely worth your time. The environmental storytelling was incredible. Dubai wasn't just a setting, it was a character. This once gleaming city buried under sand dunes where luxury hotels became refugee camps and civilization collapsed under the weight of natural disaster. The imagery of American soldiers fighting in a ruined monument to capitalism wasn't subtle, but it was effective. Spec Ops. The line deserved recognition as one of gaming's most important statements about violence and heroism, but it got dismissed as another military shooter by audiences who never saw its true brilliance.
What the fuck are we doing here?
Lugo's got a point.
Kingdoms of Amalur, Reckoning had everything going for it. A fantasy world created by R.A. Salvatore, art direction by Todd McFarlane, and game design by Ken Rolston, who worked on Morrowind and Oblivion. This should have been the RPG to end all RPGs. Instead, it became one of gaming's biggest tragedies thanks to business problems that had nothing to do with the actual game. The combat system was absolutely incredible, fluid, responsive, and endlessly satisfying. You could seamlessly switch between weapons mid-combo, chaining together sword strikes, magic spells, and chakram throws in ways that felt like choreographed dance battles. Every encounter was an opportunity to experiment with different combinations and discover new ways to devastate your enemies. But what made Reckoning truly special was the Destiny system. Instead of picking a class at the beginning and being stuck with it, you could mix and match abilities from 3 different skill trees. Might for warriors, finesse for rogues, and sorcery for mages. Want to be a heavily armored mage who casts spells with a massive sword? Go for it. Prefer a sneaky assassin who can also heal allies? Absolutely possible. The game encouraged experimentation in ways that most RPGs never dare. The world of Amalur was massive and gorgeous, filled with colorful environments that felt genuinely magical. From the autumn forests of Dalentarth to the crystal caves of Detyre, every region had its own distinct personality and visual identity. The lore was deep and engaging, with fascinating cultures and political conflicts that made exploration feel rewarding. But 38 studios went bankrupt during the game's launch window, all marketing stopped, post-launch support disappeared, and the planned MMO sequel got cancelled. How do you see? Players had no idea this incredible RPG existed because the company couldn't afford to tell them about it. The game sold decently, but nowhere near what it needed to recoup the massive development costs. This was supposed to be the start of a massive franchise that could compete with Elder Scrolls and Dragon Age. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about how business problems can destroy even the most brilliant creative work. Sleeping Dogs rose from the ashes of true crime Hong Kong, and that cancellation stigma hurt it from day one. Players dismissed it as just another Grand Theft Auto clone, but this was something much more special, an authentic Hong Kong crime story with incredible hand-to-hand combat and one of the best undercover cop narratives in any medium. Playing as Wei Shen, an undercover cop infiltrating the Triads, you experience the constant tension of maintaining your cover while staying true to your moral code. The story didn't just use Hong Kong as a backdrop, it celebrated the city's culture, language, and unique character. Every street corner felt authentic, from the neon-lit night markets to the towering residential blocks that define the skyline. The combat system was pure martial arts poetry. Instead of relying on gunplay like most open-world games, Sleeping Dogs emphasized brutal hand-to-hand fighting with environmental takedowns that were both visceral and satisfying, slamming enemies into phone booths, throwing them off rooftops, or using kitchen appliances as weapons. Every fight felt like a scene from a Hong Kong action movie. The driving felt fantastic too, with motorcycles and cars that handled with arcade perfection through Hong Kong's dense urban streets. The city wasn't just a map to traverse. It was a living, breathing place with incredible attention to detail. Street food vendors, mahjong parlors, karaoke bars, everything contributed to the authentic atmosphere. But Sleeping Dogs got lost in a crowded market of open-world games. The true crime cancellation made people skeptical, and Square Enix's marketing couldn't overcome the perception that this was just another GTA knockoff. The game reviewed well and found a dedicated audience, but it deserved to be recognized as one of the best crime games ever made. The voice acting deserves special mention. The cast delivered authentic performances in both English and Cantonese, switching between languages naturally as real Hong Kong residents do. But this wasn't just localization, it was cultural authenticity that made the world feel genuine in ways most games never achieve. Binary Domain came from the Yakuza team at Sega, and you can feel their expertise in character development and storytelling throughout this brilliant sci-fi shooter. Set in 2080 Tokyo, the game asked complex questions about artificial intelligence, consciousness, and what makes us human, themes that feel incredibly relevant today as we grapple with advancing AI technology. The voice command system was ahead of its time. You could actually talk to your squad mates during combat, giving orders and responding to their questions using your microphone. Your relationships with team members changed based on how you treated them, both in conversation and in battle. Save someone's life and they trust you more. Let them get hurt through careless play and they'd start questioning your leadership. But what made Binary Domain special was the robot destruction system. Enemies weren't just health bars, they were complex mechanical beings that reacted realistically to damage. Shoot a robot's leg and it would limp but keep fighting. Destroy its weapon arm and it would switch to backup systems or try to beat you with its remaining limb. The attention to detail in how these machines broke down and adapted was incredible. The story tackled heavy themes about consciousness and identity through the lens of an action-packed thriller. Without spoiling anything, the game's exploration of what separates humans from machines became deeply personal as the plot progressed. The squad dynamics reminded me of classic war movies, but with philosophical questions about artificial life woven throughout. Sega's marketing completely failed this game. They positioned it as just another generic third-person shooter, when it was actually an innovative blend of action and thoughtful science fiction. The voice command system and squad relationship mechanics were revolutionary, but most players never knew these features existed. The boss battles were spectacular, massive mechanical monstrosities that required both strategy and firepower to defeat. Each encounter felt like a puzzle wrapped in explosive action, testing your understanding of the robot damage system while delivering incredible spectacle. Binary Domain deserved recognition as one of the smartest action games ever made, but poor marketing in the crowded shooter market meant most players never experienced its brilliance. Alan Wake was Stephen King meets Max Payne in the misty forests of the Pacific Northwest, and it was way too cerebral for most players in 2010. Remedy Entertainment created something genuinely unique, a psychological thriller where light itself became your primary weapon against the forces of darkness. But the game fell into that dreaded middle ground where it was too action-heavy for horror fans and too weird for action fans. The episodic structure was brilliant, treating each chapter like a TV show, complete with recaps and cliffhangers. Alan Wake, a best-selling writer suffering from writer's block, travels to the small town of Bright Falls only to discover that his fiction is somehow manifesting in reality. The pages of a manuscript he doesn't remember writing are scattered throughout the town, and they're predicting increasingly horrific events. The light-based combat was revolutionary. Enemies called the Taken were shrouded in darkness that acted like armor, so you had to burn it away with flashlights, flares, or streetlights before your bullets could hurt them. This created incredibly tense encounters where you're managing multiple light sources while being stalked by shadowy figures through dense forests and abandoned buildings. What made Alan Wake special was its atmosphere. The Pacific Northwest setting felt authentic and lived in, from the quirky locals at the local diner to the Twin Peaks-inspired weirdness that lurked beneath small-town charm. The radio shows, TV programs, and manuscript pages you found weren't just collectibles. They were pieces of a larger narrative puzzle that rewarded careful exploration. But Microsoft's marketing couldn't figure out how to sell it. The game was too literary for mainstream audiences and too action-oriented for people who wanted pure psychological horror. It launched into a market dominated by big blockbuster shooters, and its thoughtful pacing felt out of step with gaming trends. The influence of Alan Wake can be seen everywhere now, from Control's reality-bending narrative to countless indie games that blend horror with meta-fictional storytelling. It found its cult following years later, but it deserved recognition as the innovative masterpiece it was from day one. Enslaved. Odyssey to the West took the classic Chinese novel Journey to the West and reimagined it as a post-apocalyptic adventure with some of the best character work in gaming history. Ninja Theory crafted a beautiful retelling where nature has reclaimed a world devastated by war, creating environments that were both haunting and gorgeous. The relationship between Trip and Monkey was the heart of everything. Trip, a tech-savvy survivor, places a slave headband on Monkey that forces him to protect her. But what starts as reluctant cooperation slowly develops into genuine care and affection. The motion capture performances by Lindsay Shaw and Andy Serkis brought these characters to life with subtle expressions and natural chemistry that rivaled the best Hollywood romances. The world design was absolutely stunning. Instead of the usual brown and gray post-apocalyptic wasteland, Enslaved gave us a planet where nature was winning the war against abandoned technology. Vines covered skyscrapers, flowers bloomed from rusted cars, and wildlife had returned to reclaim the cities. It was hopeful and beautiful in ways that post-apocalyptic games rarely dare to be. The platforming felt incredible thanks to Monkey's acrobatic abilities. Climbing through the ruins of New York, swinging from mechanical structures, and leaping between crumbling buildings created a sense of flow and momentum that made exploration feel effortless. The combat was solid too, with Monkey's staff providing satisfying melee encounters against various mechanical enemies. But Enslaved launched right into the oversaturated post-apocalyptic market of 2010. Players were suffering from wasteland fatigue after Fallout 3, Borderlands, and countless other games featuring ruined worlds. The gorgeous art direction and hopeful tone couldn't overcome the perception that this was just another game about surviving after the end of the world. The story's emotional beats hit incredibly hard. Without spoiling anything, the journey these characters take together becomes deeply personal, exploring themes of freedom, sacrifice, and what it means to truly care for another person. The ending sequence is one of gaming's most emotionally devastating moments, asking profound questions about memory, reality, and the price of peace. Ninja Theory poured their hearts into this project, and you can feel their passion in every beautifully rendered environment and carefully crafted character moment. It deserved to find a massive audience, but got buried under market fatigue for its chosen setting. Bulletstorm asked a simple question: what if shooting games rewarded creativity over accuracy? Epic Games and People Can Fly created the most innovative first-person shooter mechanics in years, but juvenile marketing and poor timing meant most players never experienced its brilliance. The skill shot system was pure genius. Instead of just killing enemies, you were rewarded for killing them in creative, over-the-top ways. Kick an enemy into a cactus, and you'd earn points for the pricked skill shot. Use your energy leash to pull someone toward an explosive barrel, and you'd get rewarded for thinking outside the box. Every encounter became a playground for experimentation. The weapons were gloriously ridiculous. The flail gun shot 2 grenades connected by a chain that would wrap around enemies before exploding. The penetrator fired giant drills that could pin enemies to walls. The bone duster was a quadruple barrel shotgun that could turn enemies into pink mist. Each weapon had multiple fire modes and encouraged different types of creative kills. But the marketing completely killed this game's chances. The trailers focused on crude humor and juvenile dialogue, making it look like a game for teenage boys who thought swearing was the height of comedy. The sophisticated combat mechanics and creative weapon design got buried under marketing that emphasized the wrong elements entirely. The campaign was actually a tight, focused experience with incredible set pieces. The giant wheel sequence, the helicopter chase, and the final boss battle were spectacular moments that showcased the game's creative potential. The story wasn't Shakespeare, but it served its purpose of getting you from one incredible action sequence to the next. Epic Games was caught between their serious Gears of War franchise and this colorful experiment, and they never figured out how to position Bulletstorm in their lineup. The game launched between major Gears releases and got lost in the shuffle despite being more innovative than either of those more successful titles. The influence of Bulletstorm can be seen in modern shooters that reward creative play, but it never got the recognition it deserved for revolutionizing how we think about combat in first-person games.
You didn't go to hell alone, General. Gonna take you. Take every
Great games don't always find their audience immediately. Every game on this list influenced countless titles that came after. If you dismissed any of these because of bad launches, now's your chance to experience what you missed. Most are dirt cheap now. Check the description for links to buy any of these incredible games. Don't forget to like for more hidden gems. Which one are you going to try first? Let me know in the comments and check out our video on games that were way ahead of their time for more incredible discoveries.